Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome to Brilliance Business TV, conversations with leading experts in business. I am your host, Mark Stephen Pooler, and we have another incredible world-class guest joining us today, the incredible Nigel Risner. Before I bring Nigel into the broadcast, I just want to make an official shout out to our show sponsors, Craig Shelley, Beverly Hills, luxury watches and fine jewellery at craigshelley.com. We are streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, post-production, Instagram, YouTube. We're also streaming live on mspnewsglobal.com, and we're also streaming through the E360 TV network under Fresh Takes, going live on Apple TV, Fire TV, Android TV, Roku, Twitch, and many, many more. So let's bring our guest into the broadcast, the incredible Nigel Risner. Nigel, welcome to Brilliance Business TV.
Thank you so much for inviting me. That list of people that this is going live to is even more exciting than I even knew. Obviously, I didn't listen to the original brief. I thought it was just like you and me, just talking, just the two of us. Who knew millions of people would be listening to this? So now I've got to up my game and get my chin ready and make sure we're looking lovely. Make sure I put aftershave on.
Now, Nigel, you was one of my first guests when I was very early on in my entrepreneurship journey. So I appreciate you giving me that opportunity over 2 years ago now.
I was your first guest.
You was my first guest. And so it's great to have you back as I've grown, and I'm really looking forward to a conversation with you. Now, you are a very, very well-known keynote speaker. You have built a global brand, which we will talk about in more detail a little bit later. I just want to go back a little bit, Nigel, to the past that has led you to what you do today.
So you may or may not know that originally I left school before I was 16. I started working in a finance company and I just got it. I have no idea how. I just got commercial finance. And when I was 16 and a half, I started interviewing for some staff to work for me. Now, if you're 16 and a half, most people are going to be older than you. And I then realized that coaching and leadership starts at a very young age. I then left the UK, went to Israel, and I started playing tennis, coaching tennis. And then I got involved in coaching hundreds of kids. And when you start coaching kids in another language, you've got to be really succinct and be really clear, because I don't know what sport you play, but in tennis, if you can change someone's grip a quarter of an inch, it's no different to challenging someone in their business by asking them to move or pivot a quarter of an inch. And, you know, with the pandemic, we've all had to pivot our businesses. So in coaching at a very young age, and I was 19 when I was coaching some very, very, very cool people, that I was working with kids. And then I was invited back to the UK to work for a bank, hated it, left, and then worked for a finance company where I didn't want to work for this man. And I said, I'll go into partnership with you. And he had £12.80 in this bank account. And I said, I'll be the manager of it all. And he said, no problem at all. And over a couple of years, I bought 29%, 49% of the business. And then eventually I bought him out for £2.5 million. Now, I was 26 at the time, and I had an investment team. We then were going public. We didn't go public. We had venture capital in my business. And this is the real point, especially for today. If I knew now what I knew then, I would never have done the deal. But I didn't have the backing. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have a Jack Canfield in my life who became one of my coaches. I didn't know this stuff. I just thought that's what you did. And I had this massive investment team. And I was 26, 27, and I didn't know the way you needed to be. I didn't know that you're supposed to wear a shirt and tie. I just did business. And as a speaker now, I realize I just do business. But in those days, and we're talking about the late 80s, there were ways of doing business. So I resigned from my own business, literally with 1 month's money, losing millions at the time, to start all over again from home. And when I made money the second time, and this is the really interesting part, you realize it's not difficult making money. What's hard is working with people, communicating with people, understanding people. And then I was blessed to go to Jack Canfield, who you know, and you've met him and you've interviewed him, who ran a program called Facilitator Skills Seminar, called FSS. Now it's called BTS, which is Breakthrough to Success. And then he invited me back for 3 years to staff and do some of the work with his applicants, with his participants. And then I created a brand to start working with chief executives in how to run their teams through better communication. So we're now up to 2000, 2001. And from nowhere, I just went crazy by speaking literally every day, anywhere where someone would offer me a cup of tea and a bagel. I didn't really care. It's a bit like when you first started doing some of your interviews, you wanted content, you wanted people on your audience. Fortunately, I was one of your first people, so you've improved massively. Your technology is enormous. Your growth, and I'm so proud of you, it's gone exponential. But when I first started, I just wanted a breathing audience to share some ideas. I was very, very blessed to work with a guy called Brian Chernett, who owned the Academy for Chief Executives. Now, here's a funny story, because you talk about serendipity. He was my next door neighbor when I was 2. Obviously, I didn't know him, but I met him in 1997, and my father introduced me to him and said, "You two should meet." And you'll know this, Mark, more than anyone. Every opportunity you get to meet people, you just got to take the opportunity, even if you know there's going to be nothing to receive from it, because you don't know where it's going to land, where it's going to go. That's called karma. You know, if you put out enough great content, and you've got some brilliant interviews with some brilliant people, eventually it's going to come back. Not necessarily today. And what I love about you, Mark, is that you're putting out all this stuff, and you may not get the rewards today, but you will in time. You know, Master Sunita wrote that great book, Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. She didn't say the money will follow tomorrow. She just said it will follow. So I met Brian Chernett. I started lecturing for the Academy for Chief Execs. I then got their Speaker of the Year award in 2002. I then started working with Vistage, which is tech. Then I went to the States to work with them and got their Speaker of the Year. And then within 5 years, I had spoken to like 1 million people, literally all over the world. And then the hard work started, because I then had to up my game, which is a bit like you 2 years ago when you first did that interview me, literally with a little mic and a clip mic. And now you've got this full studio. You've got brilliant business. You've got this whole machine, but you have to start somewhere. Yes. And I think most people who are listening to this think you just arrived. No, there was all that hard work in the background. You know, whether we move in, whether we downsize, whether we move in with other people, whether we find more equipment. So over the last 10 years, I have created a system to teach people how to communicate in the workplace and to create better relationships. And we'll come on to that in a minute. But communication is probably the number one tool that we are all not good at. And if we all got a bit better, our lives would change. So a slightly long answer to a short question, but that's where we are today. And now, you know, with your interviews, which are brilliant, by the way, and communicating to the masses, if you can improve your communication skills and you understand a bit of tech, the world is your oyster right now.
Yes, I agree. And from the age of 16, it's like you just naturally went into business, Nigel, and some of those deals, they're really, really hard scale, to say how young you were as well. Who would you say you learnt business from? Because 16, I was going out getting wasted at 16, Nigel. So tell us more. Who did you learn business from?
Okay, so interestingly, from two different people. One you're probably too young to remember. So one was my mother. So my mother was a very weird character. I mean, off the scale, nuts. I mean, I love her to bits. I mean, she's 89, but she was an entrepreneur, but didn't believe she was an entrepreneur. And she pushed me to do things so that at 14, I had a Monday morning. I had a job at a Monday market and I used to get like £6, but I'd have to give her £1. When I was 15, I had a major car accident and then I went for a job interview when I was 15. So you probably remember careers advice. And Mr. Caligaroo was my school business teacher who said, I think you're not going to do great in your exams. So my car accident was Friday, January the 13th, when I was 15. And I was off school for nearly 4 months. And I was the last person to have a careers advice. And he said, I think you should go for this job. And I got £20 for working for the day. And my mum wanted £5. She said, you've got to pay housekeeping. You've got to pay rent. So she started by teaching me, you know, if you're going to work hard, you've got to pay your way. But you probably don't remember, or you might remember, because you're so much younger than me. You're about 11 or 12, but, you know.
I wish.
There was a guy called Sir John Harvey Jones, who was one of the very first business gurus on TV, who had a program called Troubleshooter. He was the ex-chairman of ICI, and he would walk into a business to do a turnaround. And I thought this was just amazing. And he would walked into the NHS, to Morgan Cars, to Viner's Cutlery. And he would just walk around, observe, and ask people a really simple question. And do you know what the question was, Mark?
Tell me.
What are you doing? That's what he'd ask people. He'd say, what are you doing? And then he'd watch and observe, and occasionally you'd just see him mentally explode and leave the factory floor because he couldn't believe what he was watching. And I thought I would love to be able to do that. I think I was born with common sense at a very young age. So I kind of knew right from wrong. At 13, I went on a summer camp and I was in charge of the tuck shop. But I wasn't just in charge of the tuck shop. I went with the owner to a cash and carry to buy the chocolate and drinks that I thought would sell well. So I don't know where the skill came from. But when I look back, it was inherent. You know, I just knew about it. When you then go forward, most of business and most of what you and I both do is pretty common sense. If you get quality people who've got fascinating stories, people will be interested to listen. That's all your. When I work with a client, I'm going to be a little bit rude here and I'm going to try and be as nearly as PC as I can. All I can do when I work with companies is make them a little less shit. That's what you can do. You can't turn a whole business around. So I tell them I can make you less than that and I can improve your communication by a little bit that way. But if you take away some of the nasty stuff over here and you can enhance their communication over there, that's a massive gap. So if you interview better people, draw out better quality content, it goes out to the world, you build up a massive following. That's not rocket science.
Yes. And we have touched a little bit on communication, which I really do want to go into shortly and talk about teamwork, because I have had to really work on my communication skills, Nigel. When you're selling, when you're presenting, communication is so, so important. And teamwork, you can't create success alone. You have to do it with people around you for support. So these are topics I will dig into shortly. But I just want to touch on some obstacles that you have faced, Nigel, because we're talking £1 million deals, a laptop lifestyle. I used to look at you when we wasn't in lockdown and you was always outside some hotel or around the pool burning your skin. Now, I know you have faced some obstacles and you've had challenges, what you have had to keep on coming back and moving forwards from. So just talk a little bit about these obstacles and what you learned from them.
So I got married very young. So I've just had my 36th wedding anniversary. So, that's amazing in itself that someone's lived with me, put up with me, and allowed me to fly and ground me at times. I then had a boy when I was 25 who was born with very mild cerebral palsy, which was a massive shock because this was the first time in my life I was out of control of something. Fortunately, I was able to fund lots of therapy. He now is the most magnificent child. He's 34. He's now just given us a phenomenal grandson, which we are so proud of. But at the time, we didn't know if he could walk, talk, drive, and all that stuff. So we lived with a lot of anxiousness for many years. And now he's doing phenomenally well. I have a daughter who is now the casting producer for Come Dine With Me, who is a star. She is a beacon of light, lots of energy. But what's happened along the way is that I didn't really understand how big the world was and how the message needs to go across. And what happens, and you all appreciate this, we come from scarcity a lot. So a client would ring me up and say, can you go to Poland? And I go, yes, of course. Not thinking that I was in Czech. I might have been in Prague the day before or America 2 days earlier. So for years, I just went anywhere so that I was liked and loved. And this is where self-esteem is so important. Even though my cup-off had, I was full of self-admiration. I had lots of people loving what I did. I was constantly looking for the next deal. So in 2016, I had a brain aneurysm. And the reason I had a brain aneurysm is that, if you travel to 35 countries in 1 year, and I did Prague and Copenhagen in the same day, most people will take 2 days to get there, a day to recover, then speak, then get a plane. But what we do is we just take everything because we're scared we're not going to get it. So instead of coming from scarcity, I now teach abundance.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to now rock the world here. When people start teaching about abundance, that's normally because they've got abundance. It's very hard when people say, just visualize success. Well, you can't just visualize success. I need to share a myth here, okay? And it's going to upset you. I have a problem with the book, The Secret, for one reason and one reason only. Visualizing on its own won't get you success. I've got to tell you this. Visualization with some action will get you success. So when people say, I just visualized £1 million coming into my life, I promise you now, Mark, if you and I both close our eyes and we sit and visualize for the next 4 days, neither of us are going to be any richer. If we close our eyes, visualize, and every hour do something. So you ring up 4 people, you do 4 more interviews, you put it out into the US, you put it out to the rest of the world. There's a chance you get phenomenal sponsorship from the phenomenal watch company you got. But you couldn't just visualize that. You had to do something. So I'm not knocking visualization because it's a phenomenal tool. But visualization on its own doesn't work. The same as just action on its own doesn't work. You've got to act in accordance with your success map, with what you're visualizing. There's a lovely line that says, if you give an octopus skates, there's a lot of movement, but no one's going in the right direction. So you've got to have a plan, but you've got to take lots of action. The problem was I took so much action without breathing that my brain literally exploded. And I wasn't quite seconds from death, but I was seconds from death. I was on a plane when I had one of my aneurysms. Most people die from that there and then. So that's not the victim story. What I'm saying is, if I had have trusted myself, if I would have believed in myself, if I would have understood there was a roadmap to success, perhaps I wouldn't have had to have worked so hard. However, you do have to work hard. And there's a phrase that says, Goya, get off your anatomy. You've just got to do something. So too many people are writing affirmations. They're doing visualization. They're finding mastermind teams. All of that wonderful stuff. But if you look at the word inspiration, innovation, communication, determination, and you look at the way it's spelled, to the last 5 letters is ATION. Inspiration without taking action, it should be inspiration, determine action, communicate action. Then the world all of a sudden changes. So, you want to be brilliant at what you do. Inspiration alone is not going to get there. Visualization is not going to get there. So for people who are listening to this going, he doesn't like The Secret, that's not what I'm saying. The Secret's phenomenal if you take action.
Yes.
If you just take action without any visualization, you're going to be running a lot without knowing where you're going.
I agree totally, Nigel. It would be amazing if we could just think it and it was there, but it does definitely take a lot of action. So I agree with you totally there. We are going to our first commercial break, Nigel, and stay with us because this conversation is only just getting started. Join us after the commercial break on Brilliance Business TV. We're joined with Nigel Risner. He has shared how he has gone into business from the age of 16, signing £1 million deals, to then sharing some of his obstacles that he has been through, including a life-threatening brain aneurysm. Join us after the commercial break where we're going to talk about teamwork. Welcome back to Brilliance Business TV. We're joined with Nigel Risner. Before the break, Nigel has shared his journey into business at the age of 16, some of the obstacles that he has overcome and why we all need to take action. Nigel, there's no I in team. And sometimes in entrepreneurship and business, people can be a little bit selfish. Why is teamwork so important?
So there's a lovely quote that says, you have to do it by yourself and you can't do it alone.
I like that.
So if you think about your show, you've got you in the studio, but there are people behind them making this stuff work. I'm blessed that I have a team of people who obviously they can't do much about this face, but they can make the rest of my life work. So, I've got people who look after my website. I've got people who look after my book production. I've got a PA that does all the admin stuff. I've got someone who does the publicity and the PR. So I can be on stage or I can be on Zoom with you right now. And you know that my biggest phrase is if you're in the room, be in the room. So while I'm with you, the only person who matters in my whole world is you. So that, I've got a dog, I've got phone calls, I've done a LinkedIn article this morning, all that stuff going on. But in the normal day-to-day work, you've got to realize you have to have some sort of support system. Now, it might be virtual. You don't necessarily have to be paying loads of money, whether you're using Fiverr.com or loads of different platforms. If you think you can do it all on your own, you're missing a trick. So I'm blessed that I have a mastermind team of some brilliant speakers. And when I had my brain aneurysm, so I want you to visualize, I'm in hospital the 22nd of December, and my January, I have a full diary. And I've been told by my doctor, my consultant, my brain surgeon, you are not allowed to leave your bed for a whole month. Now, in 40 years, or whatever that, roughly 40 years, I'd never had more than a day off sick. I'd had 2 or 3 weeks holiday, but I'd never had a day off sick. I then had to find people who I trusted to work with my clients because these were conferences. I couldn't just say, well, I can't be there. And I was blessed. I have a mastermind team that includes Jeff Ram, one of the best speakers in the world, Paul McGee, who you know, Steve Head, Steph Duplessis in South Africa, Steve Simpson in Australia. I've got people literally all over the world who I can call on in a second, but get ready for this, who I love enough to trust enough to give them my clients and say, off you go. Now, when one of my colleagues' wife had breast cancer, he rang me up and said, Nigel, I can't be at my event. You need to be there tomorrow. He didn't have to send me paperwork. I just was there. Because when you have a trusted team, and TRUST, trust, and trust, just so you know, Mark, is like being pregnant. You either are pregnant or you're not, and you either do trust or you don't. So, Mark, I trust you 100% that this show will be amazing. I don't know where it's going. I don't know how it's going to go, but I just trust you. Not I trust you a little bit, because that means I don't trust you. You either do trust or you don't. And It's a bit like you trusted me to give you great content. You interviewed Mark Victor Hansen. You've interviewed John Martini. You've interviewed these people. You have to trust them to give you content because your shows are going live. That's the highest degree of trust, that you hope, but then you have to let go of hope and trust. So people who are listening to today's performance and to this show need to find 5 people who they trust 100% with their bank details, with their home, where you can say to someone, you know what, I can't do it. So imagine you had 3 interviews next week and you couldn't do it. I'm going to put you on the spot now, Mark. Do you have someone who could run your show?
I'm sure there's plenty of people that could. I'd have to go into my address book, but there's no one who can do it better than me.
But you need to make sure, Mark, that you've got someone, because if you've got a superstar who you've waited months and months to get on your show, and for some reason you can't do it, your voice is gone or the internet goes, people come from this scarcity. I've got to keep it all to myself. I can't share the wealth. So team, the word team, people will say together everyone accomplishes more.
Yes.
But for me, having a team, they're not in my business. I mean, I have associates, and I'll talk about my animal program where I've got associates literally all over the world. But you've got to have 1 or 2 people who you trust so much that you can just say, look, Nigel, you've got to do this. And I go, okay. I didn't have to ask for paperwork. He didn't have to say to his client, send them new paperwork. Jeff just said, Nigel will be here at 3:00. I didn't even know where Salisbury was, but I just went and I delivered. The client's now gone back to Jeff the following year to run the program. So everyone who's listening today, really start thinking, God forbid you lost your voice. You were in a hospital, and I was. Do you have someone who could run your business for a month? Not a day, but a month. Because I had to do that. I mean, you need to understand, for someone like me, I was in bed for a month. Yes. I wasn't allowed out my bedroom with a full diary.
I can just imagine, Nigel, how frustrating that was as well, because I know how passionate and how much you love your business and you love to be part of your business. But that is such a real key point, that we need people that we can trust in case we can't be there. And you're a prime example of that happening too. And then you've got no choice. So it would be better to be prepared.
We think we're indispensable. We just think it's never going to happen to us. Yes. Forget COVID, which then appeared. But, it's never going to happen to me. Well, it did. And then COVID appeared. And all of a sudden, this thing called Zoom, the nearest I'd heard of Zoom was Zoo, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But I'd never done a Zoom presentation in my life. I then had to draw on some people who were in my team and outside my team and say, show me what StreamYard is. Show me what LinkedIn Live is. I'd never done Instagram. I'd done the odd Facebook when I was walking my dog because I thought about pressing a button. But I've now done 131 paid, let me repeat that, 131 paid presentations on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or StreamYard or WebEx. These are names I'd never heard of, because you've got to be able to pivot like you've had to with your business. Yes. And recognize that you need support. So I've paid for coaching to some people who can't believe they've been coaching me, but I said to them, so I had to say, hold on, I share my screen. How do I do that? Right, press this button. Okay. And it was like talking to a 4-year-old, because I'm computer illiterate. A bit like before we started the show and you told me there was a chance I had a different screen. Then you have to get coaching. And people are very nervous to get coaching because they think it means they're not good enough. The top superstars in the world all have coaches.
Yes, I agree.
I remember working with Jack Canfield in 1997 and him telling me, he used these words on stage. He went, my coach said to me, and I'm thinking, but you're one of the best in the world. You've sold 200 million books. What do you mean you've got a coach? And that was one of these eye-opening moments for me. It was like, so hold on, my hero, Jack Canfield, has got a coach. Well, if he's got a coach, I'm okay getting a coach. Yes. So I've had speech coaches, writing coaches, internet coaches. I'll now have a radio coach because someone's bound to tell me I did something wrong and I kept interrupting you. And I'll have to learn how to be radio interviewable.
I agree totally. I have built my business through coaches, Nigel. Like you, I've had speaking lessons, business coaches, lifestyle coaches. It's really, really important to no matter where you are in the journey, there's always something new to learn. And when we need to pivot. Now, I know the keynote speaking industry, you was flying all over the world, Nigel. It did go really hard for keynote speaking at first because all of a sudden events just stopped with the global pandemic. And now you pivoted and you've been busier than ever, still getting paid speaking gigs. I'm sure there are people who have struggled though, Nigel. And why is it so important now that we support each other? We all need support.
Well, it's two things. And let me be totally honest. In March the 15th last year, so March the 15th, 2020, my diary was wiped totally clean.
Yes.
And here I've got, I've been married 30 at that point, 35 years. I've never stayed that many nights at home. And all of a sudden I'm looking at my wife thinking, this is going to be a long journey, thinking it was only going to be like 3 or 4 months. So I did lots and lots of gigs. You probably can see chocolate and Diet Coke. They became my fees. And then all of a sudden I had to believe that I could offer content that was going to be life-changing to organizations. And if you've got great content can be delivered through many different multiple channels, whether it's radio, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook Live, StreamYard, Zoom, WebEx, whatever. So I had to learn without using a green screen. And I have one below me, which I've used once because I prefer to use my own props. I prefer to use tools that I can show people. But communication and pivoting your business and getting support has been paramount. So for me, all of a sudden I started ringing up my clients, and I have lots of hotel, airline, restaurant, pharmaceutical, the NHS, to say, how can I help you deal with not mental health, that's the wrong word for me, agility, dealing with perseverance, dealing with these difficult times. How can I support you? And going back to when I first started my business, if there was a breathing audience, and this time chocolate and Diet Coke, I started speaking. And in the first couple of months, I was probably doing 2 or 3 a day to help organizations whose staff had been furloughed. So there were some staff working, some staff who'd just been left alone. How do you motivate and inspire a 21-year-old who's now back at home on a laptop or now not working at all, getting 80% of his salary while there are workers going into a factory earning 100% in the hot weather? And if you remember last year, it was boiling hot for most of the first 4 or 5 months of lockdown. So we changed the speech and we created a new speech, how to be a champion in these times, which was about character, heart, attitude, mission, perseverance, integrity, organizational skills, and nerve. And people said, well, how did you come up with that speech? Well, you've got to change if you want to be a champion to recover, discover, uncover your talent in these times. You've got to do something different.
I think it was a big learning lesson for the whole world, Nigel. We all had to pivot to some certain degree, and I think it's also had a lot of positives. I think digital media is around for a long time. It's not going anywhere. I'm missing human connection a little bit, but that will open back up. But just thank the Lord for Zoom, StreamYard, and all these amazing platforms that do keep us also connected at these difficult times. Now, Nigel, zookeepers around the world, you have built a global brand. We're on the last 7 minutes, so I really want to touch on this a little bit. And then I also want to talk about your book a little bit as well.
So communication has always been my key thing. And what I realized very early on, and I was doing a presentation at Whipsnade Zoo about 15, 16 years ago, and I saw this man with some buckets on a long trestle table, and it said monkeys, lions, giraffes, and he had all these buckets of food, and I had one of those aha moments. And I realized that this zookeeper had food he had different food for different animals to make sure they were maintained and well fed. And so I came up with this program that every one of us in the world is one of 4 animals. You're either a monkey, which is what I am, a lion, they're normally our chief execs, an elephant, who are data-driven, so they're more our architects, surveyors, who are technical mad people, in my opinion. And then you've got the dolphins, who are caring, nurturing, supportive, patient, relaxed people. And all these different animals have to come together. And the one thing that we have to become is the zookeeper. And the zookeeper's role is to feed the food that the animals need, not the food that we've got. So use you and I, for example. I love chocolate, and chocolate's my favorite food. Well, if you're lactose intolerant and you're an elephant/dolphin, what you want is either vegetation or fish. But I keep giving you more chocolate because I think that's what I want. All of a sudden, you either become sick, ill, or you start withdrawing from me. And then I think, well, you're not very nice. Then someone else comes in and says, I've got a couple of tuna fish for you, and I got some vegetation, and you start thriving. It's not that they love you much more than I do, but what they understood is what your personal needs are. So we came up with this concept that if you can identify what animal you're dealing with, and you spoke in their language, not yours, all of a sudden the world becomes a cleaner, clearer place. So we wrote a book called It's a Zoo around here. And we wrote the book, ironically, in the language of the animals. Now, you're going to like this bit, Mark. So for the monkeys, there's lots of colour paper. For the lions, not many words on each page. For the elephants, you'll like this bit. There's even a graph, because we know you'd like that. And for the dolphins, we printed it on recycled paper. So we wrote a book in the style of the different people who might be reading the book. This is virtually one of the first times ever that a book has been divided into 4 categories. So some of the best books in the world that you and I have got, we've probably bought and never read because we can't either get into it or it doesn't draw us in. So there are some brilliant motivational books out there. You know, whether it's the Bible or Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, most people have bought the book, but very few have ever finished it. Yes. So we decided to make a book accessible. Then we wanted to make sure that the world could get it. So we've now got a licensed zookeeper in South Africa. We've got someone in Sweden, in Lithuania, in Ireland, in America. We've got 4 in the UK, one who specialises in hairdressers, one who specialises in opticians. And what we're trying to do is globally change the world. So we're looking for another 50 zookeepers. And it's a very loose license. But what we want is the world learning to communicate. And as you know, a bit like the new Seekers, you're too young for this. You know, if you teach the world to sing, you get harmony. If you teach the world to communicate, you can get peace.
I love that, Nigel. I would encourage everyone to find out what animal you are free at www.nigelrisner.com. That's www.nigelrisner.com. Check out his books and take the find out what animal you are test. And Nigel, we are running out of time. I have really, really enjoyed hearing all about your journey, the obstacles you have faced, the success you have created, and how you're supporting others with communication, leadership.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.